Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Buckeye Politics. It's me, your favorite Ohioan. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive in the 2022 Michigan governor election. This is a race that a lot of people have been saying might be pretty competitive, but some polls have pretty much shown the race to be a lock for incumbent Democrat Gretchen Whitmer, which is interesting because a lot of people on the right thought she'd be very vulnerable. The Republicans pretty much seem to be united in their opposition to her. Democrats seem to support her overall, but there are some factions that think she's either too moderate or too far to the left. And Michigan is a state that's been trending right for a pretty long time, actually. Michigan used to be a solidly Democratic-leaning state. However, Donald Trump managed to win it in 2016, and because of his appeal to white working-class voters and populist types in the Detroit area, Saginaw area, more union blue-collar voters, because of that, Republicans thought that the midterm in this cycle could be a perfect opportunity to defeat Gretchen Whitmer. But if we look at the polls, really, she has been cruising to victory thus far. 538, which does have a Democratic bias, but is overall a pretty decent website, gives her a 94 out of 100 chance of victory. Basically, in 100 scenarios, Tudor Dixon, the Republican nominee, only wins about four times, or 6 times, excuse me, which is pretty crazy to think about. The fact that Michigan is supposedly this really competitive state, but apparently it's more likely that Gretchen Whitmer wins by like 20 points than Tudor Dixon wins by more than 10. So, it's interesting to think about that, especially because, Tudor Dixon is a solid nominee for Michigan, really. I mean, she pretty much united the Republican base around her before the primary, won the primary relatively handily, and she's ran a pretty good campaign thus far from what I've seen. So you would think that the race would be pretty competitive, but based on the polls, clearly it is not. The one thing that's pretty obvious, though, if you look at all the polls, is the fact that Gretchen Whitmer is struggling to get above 50%, which is always a bad sign for an incumbent, and usually means the race is actually a lot closer than people expect. As an incumbent, with the name recognition, with being in office, usually have some sort of advantage that benefits you quite a bit. And you usually, if you're above 50%, they mean that that name recognition, that job appeal, that job you're doing is usually pretty well liked, and you're probably going to cruise to victory. As you can see here, most polls have Gretchen Whitmer at about 48, 49, 50, 51, which isn't perfect. I mean, she's pretty much just at 50, so it's hard to get a good gauge. It's not like she's way below it, but she's not even close to it either. And also, if you look at the sample sizes we really only have two polls that use very large sample sizes, and that is Epic MRA, which I've literally never even heard of, and the Trafalgar Group, which is a Republican internal and is usually pretty accurate, although this cycle they've been kind of iffy. And we also have this one from Fabrizio Ward and Impact Research. I believe this was just after the primary. So you really only have three polls that are actually using large amounts of likely voters, which is what you want, especially this late in the race. You want polls that use likely voters, because those are the voters that are actually going to turn out. If you use registered voters, such as people who are registered to vote, does not mean they're actually going to vote. Likely voters are people who are likely to vote. So you want to use likely voter polls, which the majority of these are. There's just this one bullshit poll that has Whitmer up with 58 to 21, but that was back in May, and so you look at that, registered voters, a crappy poll. Who could have seen that coming? So anywho, if we look at the three races that use the largest of sample sizes of likely voters, that would be this most recent poll by Epic MRA, which, like I said, I've never even heard of, so we're going to discount that. And of the two polls that actually really, do it right in terms of how you should poll a race, that is Trafalgar and Fabrizio Ward. These two polls traditionally have a slight Republican bias, but they're really all we got because no other pollster has done this race. Trafalgar had, as of end of August, so it's pretty much been a month since we had a good poll for this race, has Gretchen Whitmer at 49% to Tudor Dixon's 45%. That shows that, yes, Whitmer does have a lead, but it's not a very big lead. It does show the race is pretty competitive. Fabrizio Ward has a pretty similar story with Gretchen Whitmer at 51% and Tudor Dixon at 46%. So like I said, the two polls that are actually conducting their polls well and that traditionally are relatively accurate compared to the rest of these do clearly show Tudor Dixon within striking distance of Whitmer. And usually Michigan's a very hard state to poll. Usually Republicans do much better than the polls suggest. If we go back to 2020, we'll see that easily. Trump was losing in every single poll by like 5-10 points. Everyone wrote off Michigan for him, and he managed to get the state within 2 to 3 points. Same thing in 2016. No, I don't think a single poll had Trump winning Michigan in 2016. He managed to win the state. So Republicans pretty much always overperform the polls. And if you look at the two ones that are the most accurate traditionally, then Tudor Dixon is clearly within striking distance. So I do think that Dixon has a shot at victory. I think as of now, Gretchen Whitmer is definitely favored, but I do think Tudor Dixon's not out of the fight. She's not going to lose by like 10 points, like I've seen some people say. Michigan is still definitely in play, and Republicans have still got to work pretty hard for it. They got to get their act together, but I think they're starting to get it done. And I think once we see more polls come out, I do think Tudor Dixon will be in a more favorable position. We just got to wait for more polls to come out. With that, thank you for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like and subscribe for more.